Hey guys, it's Mark from The Abstract. In this tutorial, we're going to discuss Drum Kit Designer, another virtual drum kit instrument built into Logic Pro. It's a very powerful tool, and it's used mainly to embody an acoustic drum kit because of the presets that it comes with embody a live drum feel. Let's open up Drum Kit Designer. We go to the instrument section of our channel strip. It's the second one on the list. We can click stereo output, that's fine, and it'll open up this window. This looks like a real drum kit. We have kicks, toms, snare, some cymbals, and a hi-hat. Those are the basic elements that embody a real drum kit. So to get a live drum feel, it's usually a good idea to have at least the instruments that you see before you as part of the mix when you're mapping drums. So what is Drum Kit Designer capable of? Well, a lot of things. Before I do anything else, now that the instrument is loaded in, I'm going to go ahead and sequence a basic pattern consisting of only kick and snare. I'm going to press record by holding down R. Here we go. Two bars should do. Now, the reason why I knew where to retrieve my kick sound and where to retrieve my snare sound is because I relied on my knowledge of drum mapping. And if you remember anything from the previous tutorial when I discussed Ultrabeat, most drum software is mapped out the same way, where your kicks are on the bottom, followed by your snares, then your toms, and then your cymbals. So if you maintain that, or if you remember that, you'll be able to get around drum mapping and drum sequencing. So I knew where to go to retrieve those sounds. Let's hear what this is. First, I'm going to open it up. I know it wasn't perfect. I can tell it wasn't perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and Command A and then press Q, and it will snap it to the bar line to the nearest 16th note value, which you definitely could change, but when we're dealing with drum hits, it's probably safe to stay within the either the 8th note or the 16th note quantization parameter. Just because there's a lot of subdividing that comes into beats. So that's usually a good rule of thumb, quantize to the nearest 8th or 16th value, unless you're dealing with super long note values. But it really doesn't matter in this case. So this is what we have between our kick and our snare. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and loop these two bars, and I'm going to go ahead and start doing things to alter the timbre or completely change the sound altogether between our kick and snare pattern. If I were to click on either the kick or the snare, let's click on the kick. It'll open up a bunch of different parameters with which we can make some adjustments. On the left side, you see that there are a bunch of different alternatives, two different alternatives to choose from for this particular default kit setting. There's also tuning knobs, dampen knobs, and a gain knob that you could apply to the sound as well. And the same goes with our snare. If we were to click on the snare, it'll give us 3 different snare options with the same parameters. We'll get into toms parameters and cymbals parameters in a few. But watch what I do in real time. Cool. So if we go back to the kick, I substituted the original kick with the second kick, and with the snare, I did the same thing. I substituted the original with the second, and then I started making some minor adjustments to the tuning knob, which tuned the drum either higher or lower than Unity, dampened it, made it deeper overall or not, or the overall volume. And I kind of found a happy balance. Cool. So that's some capabilities built within Drum Kit Designer. Now I'm going to turn off the cycle, and I am going to add a hi-hat pattern to this. I found my hi-hat sound just because of my knowledge of drum mapping. That will become more familiar with you as you start to sequence drums more and more, where these instruments lie. So I'm going to add a hi-hat pattern to this kick and snare groove right now, and I'll show you what I do. Cool, so I just played something. Cool thing about Logic is there is the capture record feature, which allows you to not be in record mode, but capture what you played. Hold down Shift R, and it will give you both of the regions here. So right now you only see the hi-hat pattern. I'm going to go ahead and click in the piano roll, highlight all, press Q, and it will lock it in. So since Logic is setting this up to have overlap between the regions that you play one on top of each other, we're going to go to no overlap, or excuse me, we're going to stay on overlap. So I can press Command J. And I created the new track because sometimes you have to create another track within Logic to make Logic identify regions that were already pre-existing. And now it has all the regions loaded in. I press Command J and it will join them into one region. Or merge them, for lack of a better word. So I added a hi-hat pattern. I'm going to go ahead and click on the hi-hat. Now, it doesn't give me options to change out the hi-hat sound, unfortunately, but it does have the tuning knob and the dampen knob. So watch what happens. I'm going to turn on the cycle again. Very subtle changes, but there were definitely changes overall. Now, combined with these parameters within the Drum Kit Designer window, you can definitely use velocity to your advantage when you're trying to get a drum feel or a drum groove, because the events triggered within Drum Kit Designer are velocity sensitive. So just for the sake of the conversation, I am going to highlight all of these, hold down Shift Option, and then that will unify the velocities and make them all very soft. And listen to what happens to the sound overall. Way less presence. But if I go to 127, not only does the color change, but the sound will as well. So when you're working within Drum Kit Designer, don't forget to incorporate velocity when we're trying to get a good sound overall. I would never have every single instrument be the same exact velocity. That's not humanistic. That really doesn't represent what a live drummer would do. If I want to add a more humanistic quality to this sound, there's a couple different things I could do. I could highlight all and randomize my velocity events. So go to Midi transform random velocity, and then it will essentially, once I select and operate, apply randomness to these events to give it more of a live feel. Now, although it was random, I had no control over my exact hit points and stuff of that regard, it still is a little more humanized. That's one way that you could do it, but I'm going to go back to fixed velocity, highlight all, Shift Option, and then drag them all to 109 or something like that, or 99, excuse me, and then maybe make the hi-hats a little less because we don't want them as interface as the kick and snare, and maybe even the kick should be a little bit heavier than this snare. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, within Drum Kit Designer, I'm going to go ahead and delete this track. Within Drum Kit Designer, there are different presets. If you apply these presets, it won't change the MIDI, but it will definitely change the sound. East Bay Kit, Heavy Kit, Smash Kit, and the same sort of procedures apply, where you could swap out kicks or snares or work with different parameters to affect sounds overall. Now, when it comes to toms, there's different types of toms within a drum kit, usually a low tom, a mid tom, and a high tom, and Logic's smart enough to represent that by allowing you to alter just the low tom parameters, the mid tom parameters, and the high tom parameters. With the cymbals, you have two crash cymbals, one on the left and one on the right, and a ride. And you could definitely apply your own unique changes to these things if you want some interesting results. So that's pretty cool. Now, within Drum Kit Designer, there is a certain type of external drum kit that we can't retrieve within just one instance of Drum Kit Designer. We have to go over here to do it in the library. They're called producer kits. Producer kits are expanded versions of normal Drum Kit Designer patches, meaning that they have more tools to be able to affect the sound in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Drum Kit right here, and you see that all these presets, Bluebird all the way down to Sunset, match the exact presets of this. So you could retrieve these different presets in the library parameter over here in the library window, or within the synthesizer itself. But as you can see, there is one thing that is different: producer kits. You can't retrieve producer kits from inside Drum Kit Designer. You have to do it over here. Now, watch what happens when I load in just a random producer kit. I'm going to do scientific method. It automatically loaded up an EQ and some compression that helped this sound come to life. I'm going to close this real quick and just play you our pattern that we already did with this new producer kit. I'm going to change the producer kit now. I'll do it one more time, just to show you that the MIDI is not changing. I don't like that kick, so I'm going to go ahead and do one more. Well, that one's not good either. Let's try Brooklyn. And sometimes it takes a few seconds to load. But what makes these things different overall? Obviously, the routing looks different, and obviously there's some plugins built onto it that had a lot to do with the sound. You could take off the plugins if you want, but I'll leave them on for now. Now, within a producer kit, there is now a drop-down arrow. Uh-oh. So all these tracks that you see now represent a simulation of what would be used to mic this drum set in a live setting. These different tracks represent the miking procedures on these different instruments. Miking procedures for the kicks, miking procedures for the top of the snare and the bottom of the snare, miking the hi-hat, the miking of the three toms there, and now it incorporates some room miking procedures as well as tambos, shakers, hand claps, and other auxiliary sounds. So within this one instance of Drum Kit Designer, you could now manipulate miking procedures to create some cool room tones and room sounds. So, and they're all routed to different buses to get different signal and to make sure that that there is proper signal being pushed into each simulated microphone. So with that, we could do a lot of different things within the Drum Kit Designer window as well. I'm going to go ahead and open up Drum Kit Designer now and click on one of the kick drums. Now, not only are there more stuff that we could work with to change the sound, but there are way more instruments to choose to swap out, especially with our kicks and our snares. Our cymbals now have options to swap. Our toms now have options to swap. So if I wanted to create a completely unique sound, so I'm already creating a unique sound simply by swapping out different instruments. Producer kits give between 8 and 12 different alternatives per drum instrument, per cymbal, per tom, per kick. There's way more to swap out. They also have the standard tune, dampen, and gain knobs, but because we are emulating the miking procedures of a real drum kit, we could add more clever miking procedures to our sound. We can add leak, which is another way to say add bleed between mics. So there's a nice blend. You don't want, when you're recording a live drum kit, you definitely want some blend or bleed from one mic to the next to make it sound like they're part of the same instrument. And leak allows for that. If we were to turn off leak, it might be subtle, but it'll act as if the mics are directly up on the particular instrument and not retrieving signal from any other mic in the kit. We want leak. And we can adjust to our overhead mics. Do we want there to be simulated overhead mics? Yes or no. We don't have to or not. And same thing with room mics. There are two different versions of room mics that we could use. And there's no correct answer here. It really just depends on what you, the user, are going for. But just know that within producer kits, you're not just changing the timbre or swapping out instruments. You're now working to get a blend between all of them with proper miking procedures. So, have fun with that. Get your head wrapped around that, and stay tuned for the next lesson.